All right. No, I'm good. I was away this weekend and lost my voice, so sound like not like I normally sound. Okay. Yeah, we got 4 minutes. So you are good to run it. Oh yeah. I'm notorious putting my phone down somewhere. Leaving it. Yeah, yeah, it's just a map. I'll go over it. He's almost ready. From here, so because we've already got a mic set up for you. Yeah. I take away the maps I made. So we're gonna start in a minute. We don't have Josh here to yell microphone. So if you guys want to take them out of their folders and put them, you can. If that makes it easier to remember, I know for me it does. Yeah. So however, whatever y'all need to do to remember to speak in it, we don't have Josh. And I'm losing my voice, so I don't want to be yelling. I know.
So I understand that at the last meeting, y'all discussed purpose. And so um, uh, at the last meeting, I started to delve into um, where we were with it, and the meeting went elsewhere. And so um, um, we ended up, they were going to missed, and today, great in here. Density. What I would like to say um, uh, regarding the more than a decade I have been putting together exhibits on Montreat's Hillside that I have, by way of transparency, pretty strong conclusions on where we are with this ordinance.
Do you mind, Wade, really quick? I want to pause before we get into today's subject and give Wade the opportunity to share the history and comments on the purpose. So if y'all want to pull the purpose out and maybe think about what we went over while Wade is sharing this piece.
Well, the historically, I've mentioned this before, but historically this came about where we were having significant grading of new development on hillsides, resulting in landslides and death. And where and death years. No, in Western North Carolina, we had one house crushed and so forth. We were having areas in the Asheville area where you had this mountainside and all of a sudden it's clear. And just like California, that was always right. And so, but that's where it came from. So what I have tried to whittle down to my concern is that it's a matter of math, merely understanding math. Zoning uses math to set setbacks, height, so and density. And my conclusion, just stated up front, is that if we look at the existing purpose in the ordinance and the new purpose that y'all came up with at the last meeting, I would say that the new purpose is fine It merely needs one more sentence. And that is, that this shall not apply to lots 1/3 acre or less. And the reason I say that is because of the map. That these, we don't have any hillsides cleared. We do have an issue of a 1/4 acre lot. If it's developed, it generally will require grading on majority of the lot where stumps are cleared and so forth. And there is an issue of safety in that. And so we have established in our hillside ordinance a requirement that 40% or more requires a geotech engineer, specialized engineers that deal with slope stability, that know the difference between colluvial and collegial. I don't know what collegial is, but colluvial is a type of soil that is dangerous. Collegial is getting along with one another. And so it makes sense that on a lot any size where the slope is greater than 40%, it's in everyone's interest, including the property owner, to involve a geotech engineer if the land is to be developed or built upon, because they will keep you safe and so forth. Beyond that, when we get into viewscape and how many trees are cut and so forth, that goes back to math. That because we were established over 100 years ago and everything was platted out at generally 1/4 acre for residential, then that's what we have. And the easily buildable lots have been built upon. And so we have the issue of people trying to build on 1/4 acre lots or just barely above 1/4 acre lots. And the existing ordinance, because of its approved graded area limitation, the 60% of the 1/4 acre lot may not be disturbed. 15-foot setbacks on the sides, 30 on the front, approximately 30 on the rear, and added 60% can't be disturbed, and you barely can build upon it at all. One of our former members has a house on Appalachian, and it's small and modest and whatnot, and they fit within the guidelines, but there's no parking on the street except Appalachian, and there's only 1 car width of the driveway that husband and wife, one can pull in first and then the other, and that's it. And in many lots you can't do that. So in all the exhibits I drew through the years, because of the practicalities of how much earth you must disturb, that's why I did all the drawings on it. That when you're just going to build a little bit here where my hand is, but you have to disturb this much area around it to cut the slopes to build it. Unless you do as has been done on Chapman Road, very expensive house recently under construction. You use shotcrete and like a swimming pool stuff where you go vertical with concrete against the banks and so forth. Mighty expensive stuff. And we don't have the type of development that has occurred all around this area that led to these disasters and environmental disasters, forgetting life lost. We have our few lots remaining and geotech requirement on 40%, 40% spout builds. And that'll deal with safety, but where we are dealing with viewscape, then that gets to be a matter of, well, I'd rather see more trees than not. But the math on 1/4 acre lots makes that so close to a taking of the property or a diminishment of its buildability It's been my strong held belief that I've just shared that that's, and that because of the quarter acre lots and so forth, then I think our requirements for hillside ordinance need to be limited to the requirement of a geotech engineer. And I have been tried to share all these years the different drawings I've done to show how that evolves, but that was to make it work. Yes, my comment was that that's fine if you add one sentence to it, that this does not apply to lots of 1/3 acres.
Well, that wouldn't go into the purpose. That would be under applicability. That's a different section.
Well, then transparency, I'm saying we're ahead. Attorneys, of course, you know, been living with English and architects graduate not being able to spell. So the reason I added that sentence is because that did not say there's no reason not to have a purpose of preserving viewscape and natural aesthetic characteristics. And then I would add where that's feasible to that purpose. Seems that wise. But that's my cut to the chase.
I think it needs the and because we're talking about the stone structure.
It's located in the stone.
Okay.
I had a couple times.
They are outdated. I don't know how much that would change. Yeah, I think so too. So, Bill, before you share this, Wade, do you have any specific comments on the purpose? That limiting of what lot size would apply is under applicability. That doesn't go on. No, I get that. So if you look at the hillside development, the purpose is narrative in nature, and then you have a different section for applicability. You would not put, this does not apply to lots less than 1/3 of an acre under there, it would be under this section. So I just want to know, do you have comments about the new purpose? The specific text of this paragraph? Because we will get to this other part next, but I just want to close this purpose section before we get to the next piece of applicability.
I like that. What's that? It was possible. So they have a small lot.
Well, right, so typically how an ordinance is structured is it's the purpose, it's the dimension applicability. And that's, in this ordinance, you can see that, but what I'm specifically asking about is this, under the new purpose, this specific text. Do you like this? Do you not like this? Do you think anything should be added?
Because the lot size limit to what applies would be under a different section, and we can dive deeper into that in a minute. I just want to close this piece out. Okay, Bill, do you have some questions, some statements about this? Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay. I think it's supposed to be one word. Yeah, it's supposed to be one word. Okay, cool. All right, so any other comments on the purpose before we move on? I mean, I think either way is fine. We'll have to adopt the whole thing at the end, but if you guys want to adopt this. Yeah. What? Okay, so the next thing that we had was the approved graded area and development intensity ratio regulations. So I think that, Wade, we can start having this conversation about applicability while we talk about this, because I think it ties into what you're saying of the amount of land you're allowed to disturb on these smaller lot sizes. So I think it ties into this. So we'll just kind of tie that piece in, whether there should be a limit on the applicability based on lot size. So we'll just tie that into this conversation. So I just want to, before I let y'all take it, I just want to share. So I made these maps of the slope, and I broke it up into what's 25%, between 25 and 40%, and what's 40%. Now, I wasn't able to calculate the average lot size for those lots that are over 40%, but I did take the average of all of the lots in Montreat. I took out the large MRA parcel, which includes the conservation easement and most of the ETJ. And so the average lot size without the MRA parcel is 3/4 of an acre out of that entire data set. So this is the 930 lots that make up Montreat. The median of those lots was 1/3 of an acre, and the mode is about 1/4 of an acre. So most lots in Montreat are 1/4 of an acre. No, I did this. This is, yeah. So the average lot size without the MRA parcel was 3/4 of an acre, and I took that out because that parcel is just so large that it's an outlier. The median was about 1/3 of an acre, 0.33, and then the mode is about 1/4 of an acre, so 0.26. So while y'all are talking about, this, I think, high level overarching question of should this ordinance apply to all lot sizes? And Wade has suggested that the ordinance begin applying at 1/3 of an acre. So anything less than 1/3 of an acre would not apply. Anything less than 1/3 of an acre with a 40% slope or more would not apply, would not have to comply with this.
I would say
That's what your suggestion was.
what-
A quarter to 1/3. So 1/3 and below, or 1/3 or less. Okay, so that's Wade's suggestion. So while we're going through this and while you guys are talking about what you found, just keep that in mind when we talk about the approved graded area and development intensity ratio. The suggestion is there is potentially a suggestion, a route we could take to limit what lots this ordinance would apply to based on their size. It only applies right now to lots 40 with a slope of 40% or greater, but we could have a further limitation on it. So I'm just going to let y'all talk about what you found, what you thought. And again, I just want you guys to keep that high level applicability potential of whether we want to limit that in mind. Right. The suggestion that Wade made is that we potentially limit the ordinance to lots that are 40%, lots with a 40% slope or greater and greater than 1/3 of an acre in size. So that's just something to think about while we talk about the way that the approved graded area and development intensity ratio regulations currently impact lots. So just keep that suggestion in mind. And I was talking to Wade before the meeting started, and this is a really dense section. So I don't expect us to get through this today. Yeah, but just especially with this new suggestion about limiting the applicability, not only based on slope, but also based on lot size, just keep that in mind while you guys are discussing. So I'm just gonna turn my mic off and y'all go ahead.
I have a comment. I think these two resources Kayla put in our email, and they really are good. And I went ahead and had Angie, I paid to have them printed, and I would be welcome to share. But neither of them are, one might have been Buncombe County, just casually, but they're areas that are like us, Cashiers, very mountainous, small communities. But one is a toolbox. The other one really deals with steep slopes. And reading through these, probably the first thing that came to my mind is how much they recommended you don't even build on 40% or greater. And I thought, well, why is that? And so it really went back to what we talked about last meeting, where the things that we have in our purpose, the aesthetics, the slope stability, the erosion prevention, stormwater control, and I might need different words to go with our new purpose, but that all that is intertwined. I kind of made a circle in my mind that you can't really have one without the other. And so I think, Wade, I really appreciate your comments. I really respect your gifts and the things that you bring to this. But my question would be, if all of those things are intertwined, the stormwater, the sediment, the erosion control, the aesthetics, why would it matter what the lot size is? And I'll just, it's a question, whether it's 1/4 or 1/3, wouldn't we need to have the same protection for a lot, no matter what size it is, because it is a steep slope of 40% or greater?
I'm only gonna say this once, Mike's.
The, the issue is, whether or not the math matters. And so where, you have a cashier's person.
I would have to look.
Cashers is one of them.
Kayla
Cash-
might, but
so
these are
cashiers,
excellent, excellent
Uh,
resources.
Family had two houses lights. That's really exclusive. And, Monterey, not to use a peculiar word, but Monterey was created with a purpose. And that's what it's all about. Modest means that we have here to hold the issue of Monterey as a found institution. So in looking at the examples from other communities, we're going to compare us with another who need what was there for us. And what we're doing on sizes. That will be development. You say let's don't build on lots.
I
So-
wasn't,
no,
yeah, I
no, but,
wasn't saying that. I'm asking a
when
question.
Communities suggesting that.
And they weren't. I think we need to look at it for ourselves, and I probably shouldn't have even said cashiers. What it is, these two put together things, we're trying to allow development, but preserving the mountains that we love.
So if I may, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I said I was gonna stop talking, but it's just not possible. I have this problem in my personal life too. So when I looked at this information and the ordinance, I kind of broke it into two pieces, existing lots and new lots. So when we talk about lots that are already existing, they are how they are. There are provisions in the Hillside Development Ordinance that require re-subdivision of lots for development, things like that, but that isn't always feasible. When we're talking about that, we're really talking about a limited, I would just say there is a limit on adding new area to the lots that exist. They are, for purposes of this discussion, I think for the most part, they are the size that they are. And again, when we look at the average lot size in Montreat, and this is all parcels, this is not just those that would be subject to the current steep slope, the current Hillside Development Ordinance. The most frequently occurring lot size is 1/4 of an acre. Now, the other piece is new lots, so subdivisions. So when we talk about Harmony Lane, I think it's a really good example. Up there, new subdivisions would be larger than these existing lots. So if we look in the Hillside Development Ordinance now, that development, I think it's exactly which one it is. It's the development density. So there's a minimum lot size, there's a minimum units, there's a maximum units per acre. So when we're talking about new lots, new subdivisions, those we're able to, I think, move a little bit more within the size of the lot because that's not determined yet. And as far as what is the requirement for a new lot to, if it's 40% slope, the minimum lot size is
1.25 acres.
its minimum lot size is 0.6 acres, but the units per acre is 1.65. So you'd need 1.65. You need more than an acre and a half of land to be able to develop. So when we're talking about this, we have two scenarios. We have new development, and we have existing development. And it's two very different situations because of Montreat's historic lot size with the lots that are already developed that do have these steep slopes defined in this ordinance. So that's one scenario. Then we also have this new scenario where the lots would be required to be bigger, but they do still face the same development restrictions that the smaller lot sizes have. So I feel like I was listening to y'all talk, and I think those two pieces were maybe getting a little bit blended together. So just as we're discussing, maybe keep these two scenarios in mind. You know, with these lots that are already subdivided that are existing and just not developed, for more likely than not, we're not going to be able to change that lot size. It is what it is for the most part. But for new subdivisions, we would have larger lots. So just keep that in mind.
In the graded area.
Do you mean they would have the larger lots because of the requirement?
They would need it to develop. They would have to be a certain size. And Bill, I think we're just really talking generally about, I think, this applicability question. Yeah, I think we're talking, I think, generally about how this minimum lot size plays into it and the balance between promoting development, allowing use of property, and then this protection. So that balance. So Wade, do you think maybe you could talk a little bit more about, so, you know, this range of 1/4 of an acre to 1/3 of an acre, whatever, should we decide to put some lot size limit on what this ordinance would apply for? I guess, you know, we're talking about the dangers of landslides, slope, stability, things like that. How does that risk change? Does the impact on aesthetics and viewscape change as lot size decreases? Like, I guess maybe could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, the issue is addressed by having a requirement, regardless of the lot size. If it's 40% or greater, you must have a geotech. And so because you have a geotech, then your life safety matter
Okay.
and the landscape.
Let me clarify. I now understand what you're saying, Wade. Wade is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that the AGA and that these limits on grading and impervious surface should not apply if you are less than a certain size, but you are required to still do the geotech engineer evaluation and report. And, you know, I guess other pieces in here too, but you're specifically speaking to the grading, the approved graded area and development intensity ratio not applying.
Because of its basic math.
But they would still be required to do the geotech. And would we now, in the way that you're kind of seeing this, do you think that it would be, so we know we'd want the geotech to still apply. What about, sorry. Let's see.
See, architects are ruled by the most basic principle of life safety.
Right. So what about these other pieces, artificial slopes, preservation of vegetation, LRV, those pieces?
Well, that gets into some maybes. So if you
Okay.
if you don't have the AGA in many cases for 4 acre lots means you can't use the bill. That's my
Yes.
belief. But that doesn't mean you can't use native plants and so forth.
Have a restriction on the slope or your LRV.
But where it affects, what land on the site can be disturbed. If we're concerned about life safety and so forth, then we have solved that by the engineer who knows and has to determine the soil type for you to build, and has to determine what foundation you have and so forth. The geotech engineer cost them already some money just on rebuilding Robert Lake Park, because there's still the erosion issue and so forth. So geotech engineer is huge. In that restoration. So that's the expert.
Yeah.
And then we have ourselves as amateurs talking about viewscape.
These
And
aesthetic,
those
yeah.
are things that we personally as a homeowner would like to see.
It's
Better
a very
viewscape and so forth.
interesting proposal. So Liz, Bill, do y'all understand what?
In our ordinance book.
Forty percent or
Oh.
greater.
No, I.
No.
MRA used geotech because of this.
That brings up a whole.
No. I'm sorry. I spoke just within those that are 40% or greater. He is saying limit the grading and impervious surface limits on the really small lots that are underneath some threshold. But the geotech survey, the geotech assessment, and the other provisions that are related to aesthetics would continue to apply.
Is that true, Wade? Because I keep hearing you say not the aesthetics.
You could have native plant issues and so forth, and you live with that. You can have in the hillside is what color you paint your houses. So, and the geotech assessment is for geotech assessment is required for 40%.
Right. Right.
4% is not that steep. And
But-
at that level, I can generally change the site. But it's 40% determined will require geotech engineering perspective. No, no, because the normal engineering already covers less than 4%. I'm just asking the question. No,
So the Hillside Development Ordinance would apply to every lot that has a slope greater than 40%. And what Wade is proposing is that then it breaks down. Under anything over a certain size in acreage, Wade has suggested something between 1/4 of an acre to 1/3 of an acre. Anything over that amount has to be a geotech assessment, is subject to grading limits, is subject to impervious surface limits, and then vegetation, preservation of vegetation, LRV, those pieces. Now, everything less than that size, you would still do the geotech assessment. You would still preserve vegetation, have to be subject to LRV, but you would not have the grading limits and impervious surface limits because of the smaller lot size. Is that right, Wade? Did I
yes, so
capture this?
yes, so
Did this capture what you were saying?
yes,
Well, because I think Liz and Bill just want to know, basic, is this capture what you're saying?
yes.
Okay, Yes. Right, is that we're taught, well, I think it's a very interesting idea. You know, when we talked when I did that review of the AGA and how that development intensity ratio further limited the development envelope, I do think that's a very interesting idea. Because it does, it works in that balance of development and preservation. So, I mean, the only, I think, concern I have is just the number of lots that are in Montreat that are a quarter of an acre. But that's the only thing that I would say I would be a little concerned about, is taking away both of the requirements. And again, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an architect. So I don't understand these things necessarily on the mathematical level that Wade and engineers and other architects would. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of where I stand. It's just, oh, that's required anyways. Oh yeah, no, it's set in there. Yeah, when I get a geotech assessment, I read through it and I take out everything in there that the engineer has highlighted as either required or recommended. And Dan, the building inspector, and I look at it together. Yeah, and we can look at that.
Well,
Yeah, because an engineer is sealing it. Sealing it. If they lose their seal, they are not an engineer. So for me as a planner, because I'm not an engineer, if it's sealed, I trust that. Yeah. So, and in my experience, engineers typically, if I have a question or a concern, I'll go to them and say, you know, I noticed this in the report, or I noticed this in my own review of the site. You know, what are your thoughts on it? And I'm comfortable with that. No, they have to be, they have to be licensed. It's a sealed, that's already in there. Yeah. Liz, do you want to?
I love your diagram. It's great. I'm very visual, hands-on person. And I'm going to respectfully disagree. And I need some convincing. Because I'm kind of looking at the whole thing, and I'm looking at our purpose. Guidelines for responsible land use in steep slope areas, 40%. Address factors unique to Montreat, which we've talked over and over. It's a very unique place. We only have limited size. Our lots are small. We have a college here, MRA, etc. The challenges in locating and installing structures and managing erosion, sedimentation, and stormwater so as to ensure the stability of our hillsides, promote low impact development, and preserve the viewscape and natural aesthetic characteristics of the town. And so I understand that. I can appreciate the wanting a little bit larger lot before you have to use certain criteria. But I'm very, very cautious. We are talking about hillside development in Montreat. The lots are small. I just think it's something we really need to talk about. I'm anxious to hear about the comprehensive plan. I think it's still going to be low development. I'm not against people. I want new neighbors, and I understand that. I just am very cautious, because if we change, I think we'll have to be very careful that we're not exposing Montreat to other issues like the erosion, sediment, those kind of things. Kayla, did you?
Yeah, if I may. So when I went through these, I used a little highlighter because I think I might be a visual learner too. And I highlighted where an ordinance mentioned grading, where it
Yes.
mentioned disturbance, and if it mentioned a ratio. Yeah.
Yes.
Most of the existing ordinance, and again, they are not contextual to Montreat. They have a different purpose, different, we have a very unique plating situation here. But most of the regulations mentioned grading limits based on either lot size or slope. Very few mentioned impervious surface limits. And then none of them mentioned a ratio between this development intensity ratio. I only found that here.
Were there any in these, the tool, do you know, did you have time?
Not that I remember standing out. I know that grading was frequently mentioned, as a, recommendation to address grading limits, techniques, things
It's
like
very preservation oriented.
Yeah, so I mean, I will just throw that out there that when I look through these, I did see grading limits mentioned quite frequently. Did not see impervious, only a few mentioned impervious surface, and none mentioned a ratio. So I will just offer that as far as what other communities are doing.
What are your thoughts? What about the opportunities for people to, we haven't even talked about this yet, and I'm not sure when it will be. Where they can apply for certain things. How do that?
Yeah.
Yes, the reductions. Is that a way that new development or the quarter size lots can have maybe case by case or something? Okay.
And say, well, it's just a full land. I like this word. What's I'm like, the mayor is land and things to be taught. And bigger quarter of the lot, take the setbacks, take the area, and what's left. 40% of so, whereas the other
It wasn't the community that said that. It actually is a map from like a North Carolina. I can find it here. It's a chart. And it's just recommendations. I mean, it's a really good, it's just that landslides occur more frequently.
One of
Yes, yes.
One of the recommendations has been for those of us who own property with difficult use, so a lot of it is donated green space.
That's another issue I was gonna, about incentives, about people donating.
And we have contributed money to regarding space that we did 40 years ago. let's say, we walk with some blocks. And, but, it takes another step, well, it takes to another step, well, those of us who have ours are happy. And, you know, we okay with you having one, and a lot of people say yes unless it's next door. And so, it's, comes down to math, one, and number two, it comes down to the purpose of this, the establishment of this community. It was never established to be a resort type of community. So it, the Puerto Rico lots, folks who could afford it, bought more. But it's set up so that
My granddaddy was one of those.
Wade, what about, so I'm hearing these two pieces right now of concern over removing both grading an impervious surface and then also the limits those two pieces put on the usability of a property. What about taking away one of them and leaving the other? What does that do? So like, for example, if we took away the development intensity ratio, which is the limit on impervious surface, and left the grading, does that make the building envelope more feasible?
no grading area makes the building not feasible. This photograph of my next door neighbor's house, so it's tied to the fact that you cannot be building a house. There the area, which you don't do. When you put trees that were exposed to check on both along the house. With that skin, it's if it's less than 40%, I'm building with 1,000 square foot rent house right now, and I have solid stormwater tanks from one end to the other. Capture 3,000 gallons of water. And my lots like this. So that's the stormwater. And anyway, that's, we're not addressing stormwater. They're addressing the hillside. And the hillside ordinance makes sense to have geotech because that's life safety. And life safety also affects erosion. The geotech is stabilization. That's also on erosion. But when you just say taking away water setbacks, we're taking away grading area, the map. Very least.
You bring up the fact that Montreat was developed to be a place for retired missionaries and respite for, retired pastors, respite for missionaries, etc. And it's interesting, the homes that, were built a long time ago are much smaller, simpler. There are big ones, big ones that were probably more churches built or whatever. I live in a small home. And it's interesting, we have changed, from small lots and people want larger things, and stuff. Totally understand that. I guess when I look at this, I'm not an architect. I'm not an attorney. And I've always been very open about being on P&Z just as a community member. And that's why I'm cautious. And because decisions we make, that house can be there for 100 years from now. And so it's not, there's nothing, I'm not against anything. I just want to make that clear and really want to have good, robust discussion. But I do take it seriously, the direction that Montreat's going, because what we do decide for Hillside Development is what our grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to be looking at. And I think about that. I walk in Montreat tons. The leaves are down. And I respectfully disagree that we don't welcome people to come live here, because I believe that we do. And I think of the Maters, and the families that want to come, or families that buy existing homes and fix them up, churches that do that or whatever. Montreat is a very, very special, I believe, very loving place. At the same time, it's also deeply loved because of its mountains. And so that's where I'm coming from, Wade. I'm not against anything. I'm just coming from that viewpoint as a member of the community. Does that make sense?
Yes, but don't ignore the fact.
I'm not ignoring the math whatsoever. I do math all day at work. I'm not. I understand that. That's why we're here talking about it.
Well,
But
not trying to but it does reflect, it's not fair to 60%.
I think that that's a matter of opinion. I don't know what my opinion is about it. No, yes, because when we buy a lot, whether I've lived in other communities, bought and sold, when you buy a lot, you know what it is. And it doesn't mean we don't want people to maybe have variances or things like that to help them build. But I just think that we have to be very careful when it's a broad sweep of changing something without thorough, robust discussion, not feeling rushed, and time to research and talk and make good decisions, because it will affect my grandchildren, your grandchildren, so on and so forth.
So,
Not against anything.
so we're 4 minutes away. Do you want to? We're going to come back to this. Yeah.
Is it our?
I think though, if maybe we could just stay within this discussion of this lot size. And I think are unanimous that it still needs to apply to 40% or more, and that you need a geotech assessment. I think the sticking point I'm hearing right now is whether or not limits on grading and impervious surface should apply to lots over a certain size. So I think all of that includes the scope and applicability, but maybe just sticking to kind of, because that will impact scope and yeah, I just don't want to deviate from like this topic. So we meet next on May 4th, and we had the development density table, but I think we need to keep talking about the impact of this ordinance on small lot size in terms of grading and impervious surface limit restrictions. And whether or not that should be equal across the board to lots of 40% slope or greater. Yeah. We did a little, but not specific. Yeah. I think so. If what I'm hearing is right, we want to focus next time on whether these grading and impervious surface limits should apply to, and again, this is under the umbrella of this only applies to lots that have a slope of 40% or greater across the board. The discussion we're having right now, and the discussion I think we should continue next time, is whether or not grading and impervious surface limits should apply to all lots, or if it should be based on lot size, under the umbrella of this only applies to lots with 40% slope or greater. And the one thing I will throw out there is, if anybody has any engineer friends who maybe want to come talk to us specifically about, just in general, we're not looking for a specific engineer evaluation opinion, just consequences of no impervious and grading restrictions on small lots. We know they
Okay.
will still have that geotech assessment, and they'll have to comply, and they have to comply with that. They have to. And I'm not sure if there are other things that we could put in place that would add extra protection while also opening the development envelope up. So yeah, I will be kind of looking into that myself in the next month to see if we could get someone to maybe come talk to us in terms of the engineer side of it. But that, I mean, what do y'all think about that track as far as our next meeting, which is May 4th from 4 to 5? Keeping on this track.
I like that very much. And last meeting, you made the comment, I wrote it down. Looking at the things that we're going through, what it's going to look like on the ground. And so I guess that's the glasses I'm looking through, and that would be quite helpful. And I was going to ask you, Wade, is there any resources that you recommend to help us understand this, the math, or anything?
Really are. The pervious surface is already covered regardless of slope. Well, our house, the buildings, gradual slope, 3,000 gallons. Yeah, some of them. Sure. But some of what I call my back lot.
Mhm.
Yes. And I have three or four reports and stuff like that.
Okay.
The walls all before. So the legal requirements are take some, and then that is indicated. So we're pretty well protected by what's legal. One thing that we found in this hillside that we've done that nobody knew about was telling people what color the house is.
What hillside are you referring to? What hillside are you referring to? Oh, a home that you've built?
No, in our ordinance, we have this ERA.
Oh, okay, the paint
So,
color
and
or
just
paint.
So that you know, but stand,
Like,
when you're up on lookout, you can see on Upward Way and White House. And on this side is South Carolina home. And so we put in the ordinance, you can't do a White House. Like this. And everybody was okay with it.
it's the 32%. We probably need to adjourn.
Translation. House.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
Is there a second?
Yeah, there's a second.
All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
So we're gonna meet again on May 4th at 4 in here. And we're gonna keep talking about whether grading and impervious surface restrictions should apply to all lots or if they should be a certain size.
Correct. Good.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That's great. And it, be fun. Oh,